Hey, what's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. I know there hasn't been a video here in a little bit, but we're just not going to worry about that. Anyway, I recently competed in the 2020 Players Cup, which is the large online VGC tournament that's being held in place of the IRL circuit that was canceled due to the coronavirus pandemic. Am I even allowed to say that on YouTube? Is that still demonetizable? But yeah, I recently played in the Players Cup, which I qualified for placing within the top 256 in the North America region during the May International Challenge. And I'm guessing if you can read the title of this video, you know exactly how I did. No, but seriously, guys, I honestly had a little bit of a hesitation when wanting to do anything with these videos, because I knew I wanted to record my run in some capacity, but after my disappointing performance, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do with them. But I figured that I would do a little bit of a post-commentary analysis type video for you guys, just for your own entertainment, but also for me to sort of, you know, look back at my mistakes and sort of try to figure out what went wrong. Because as we all know, one of the best ways to get better at Pokemon is to look back at your losses and learn from your mistakes so you don't make them in the future. That was stupid. But anyway, guys, here is, without further ado, my 0-2 run in the Players Cup, and we'll be getting started with winners round 1. So for my first round, I was paired up against a Battlefy user that went by the name of Duty, who actually I later found out to be Donald Smith Jr. or Donald WSJR on Twitter. He's a name that you guys may or may not be familiar with, depending on how involved you've been in the online grassroots circuit or just the VGC Twitterverse as a whole. But he is a rather new player to the scene and is apparently a developer for Magic the Gathering, which I think is super cool, and I'm really glad that he's been able to find such early on success in his VGC career, as he's been doing pretty well in the online grassroots tournament scene. But yeah, I guess without further ado, let's get into team preview. So we have the two teams on screen here. My team, which is going to be front and center here, is going to be Lapras, Dracovish, Whimsicott, Indeedee, Arcanine, and Duraludon. This is not an original team by me. I borrowed the 6 from a team that Poke Alex or Alex Gomez was using in the Victory Road European Cup. Lapras is an archetype that I've been messing around for a little bit, and it was something that I felt relatively comfortable with, and I just really like the comp of this team, and I think it's something that I could have done really well with. But looking at my opponent's team here, we have Venusaur, Torkoal, Incineroar, Dusclops, Togekiss, and Magnezone. Now, something important to point out before we get into this, for those of you that don't know, for the Players Cup, they introduced a special sort of rule or thing that made it so you were allowed to see your opponent's team sheet before and during the match. So during the battle, both players are given access to each other's, basically the team's moves and abilities, and whether or not a Pokemon is able to Gigantamax. The only things that were hidden were anything having to do with the stats, so that means natures and exact numbers. So pretty much a large majority of the opposing team's information was at my disposal here. And just going into some initial first impressions here, Sun is never a fun team to go up against, and he does have a couple things on this team that make the matchup a little extra problematic. As you can see, my team doesn't really have an immediate way of dealing with Dusclops. My best way of sort of shutting down Trick Room stuff is either Taunt with Whimsicott or Indeedee with Imprison. Another thing that stuck out to me is Magnezone, which is a bit of an unconventional pick. Magnezone, of course, being a new addition to VGC Series 5 thanks to the Isle of Armor DLC, and I think you guys will see later on how problematic Magnezone ended up being for this team. And of course, Sun is never a fun matchup to play. Venusaur Torkoal always forces some awkward, I guess, 50-50s on whether or not you want to taunt this Venusaur to prevent it from setting up a Sleep Powder, or, I mean, now Venusaur has access to its Gigantamax form, so you can they can easily punish a taunt play by just Gigantamaxing and firing off a powerful max move. And I know this Venusaur is Life Orb, so any max moves coming out from this thing are going to be doing a ton. But good news is it doesn't have Protect. That's a really nice piece of information to have just in general, to knowing that a Pokemon doesn't have Protect, so you can just kind of freely attack into it. But speaking of not having Protect, one more problematic Pokemon that does show up on this team is Incineroar. Now, Incineroar normally not a huge deal for this team, as I do have 2 water types and an Arcanine with close combat that can easily dispatch of it. But this Incineroar is carrying the Assault Vest, which kind of mucks up the Lapras calcs a little bit, as you can see, as you will see later on in this match. So yeah, this is definitely a tricky matchup for sure, but definitely something I felt was winnable. And yeah, let's just get into game 1. So going into game 1 here, my opponent is going to be leading off with that Venusaur and the Togekiss, while I lead off with the Indeedee and Lapras. I felt this was a really safe middle ground lead because I feel like he was going to try to rely on that Magnezone and Dusclops combination because he was likely looking to set up Trick Room against my pretty fast team. But also the threat of Imprison was something that he had to keep in mind, so there was always a possibility that Dusclops was probably going to be something he wanted to bring in the back. Lapras is usually just a good lead in these scenarios, just to try to get up that resonance as quickly as possible. And I was sort of unsure of my position here because I wasn't sure exactly how I was going to stop Venusaur for really getting off a Sleep Powder here, but then I remembered, wait, my Indeedee is faster than both of these Pokemon, and I do have a boosted spread expanding force, so I can get around Togekiss's Follow Me shenanigans and pretty much just knock out Venusaur, because I know basically right off the bat that he's not carrying a Focus Sash, but so I can pretty much just stop Sleep Powder if he decides he wants to try to go for that. But realizing this, he's going to Gigantamax the Venusaur here just to try and make sure that he can take that expanding force a lot better. Of course, I'm going to go for that Gigantamax onto Lapras turn 1 here. I did calc this before I started this battle. I do live a Life Orb Gmax Vine Lash from this Venusaur, and it's coming off, even if it's coming off of Frenzy Plant, which this is, so that's a very powerful Gmax Vine Lash. And I go for Expanding Force with Indeedee, and I was really honestly surprised of how much damage that did to Venusaur. Like, I was not expecting it to do over half, but I underestimated Indeedee greatly, and added with that Life Orb recoil, that easily sets it up for a 2-hit KO next turn. And with that Follow Me, easily able to get a Gmax Resonance off into the Togekiss, cleanly knocking it out with my Life Orb and coming off that powerful Gmax Resonance, which is coming off of Blizzard. So I think it was a pretty good turn for me. I took a lot of damage on Lapras, and of course Gmax Vine Lash being set up is not the most ideal thing, because I'm going to be taking that residual damage every single turn, and now since Lapras is at such low HP, I'm not going to be sticking around for much longer. But I still think I'm in a pretty good spot here. Of course, Torkoal can come in to set up the Sun here and just immediately double Venusaur's speed and make it so it can just be faster than Indeedee mainly is the most important one, because we all know it's going to be faster than Lapras at this point. But Incineroar is going to come in, get off that Intimidate. Not really a huge deal for both of my special attacking Pokemon, but this is a little bit awkward because Incineroar comes in and Indeedee just flat out cannot hit Incineroar, and I think that was a win condition that he was going for a couple times during this game, because basically if it's just left with Indeedee and Incineroar, Incineroar wins that 100%, because not only can he just hit me with a super effective Dark type move, but he can also just I just can't hit him, period, because my only attacking move on Indeedee is Expanding Force. So I'm in a bit of a pickle here, because I kind of have to respect the fact that he can just bring in Torkoal and immediately outspeed my Indeedee. So realizing this, I wanted to protect my Indeedee as much as possible, because I think Indeedee is a really important Pokemon to have, especially if a Trick Room option is something you want to go for in the back with Dusclops. But I make the correct play or make the correct decision in assuming that he's going to Max Guard the Venusaur and try to take out Indeedee. And as I go for Max Geyser into the Incineroar, does not get the KO. So if this were any other Incineroar item besides the Assault Vest, that would have been an easy knockout onto Incineroar, and that would have been an amazing play by me. But I still think this play was really good, because I bring in my Whimsicott here pretty much for very little cost here, just a little bit of its HP. I'm not carrying a Focus Sash on my Whimsicott, so I don't really care about the residual damage. Now, I think I make sort of a misplay here by bringing in Arcanine. My thought process, like, in the immediate short term was that, oh, like, Indeedee, like, he can easily just switch in Torkoal, or he could do something to make it so that he can switch in Torkoal and basically just try to knock out my Indeedee, or he can do something with Venusaur to make it so that he can just score a free KO on Incineroar. So basically, I'm in a position... No, I remember the 50-50 here. So I either knock out Incineroar with Moonblast and not get speed control up, which allows him to bring in Torkoal and just double Venusaur's speed and make it so it's able to knock out my Indeedee, or I can Tailwind and then risk Venusaur switching out, or, basically not getting a KO on Venusaur here. And just letting Incineroar knock out Indeedee for free, which is not really something I want to happen here. So I guess that was my decision in bringing in Arcanine, but in hindsight, I think I would have just been in a better position all around if I brought in Indeedee, because if he makes a play like this, where you can just switch out Venusaur, I'm basically forced with Arcanine, which I, of course, was going for a Flare Blitz in this situation. Goes into Torkoal, it takes that relatively well, and of course I'm stacking up Recoil on my Arcanine, which is only going to be compounded by this Darkest Lariat damage, which is not going to be doing a whole lot thanks to that Intimidate, but combined with the Gmax Vine Lash, going to be bringing Arcanine to under half of its health here. So with Torkoal and Incineroar being on the field, I still feel like I'm in a relatively good position. However, Torkoal is a bit problematic. But I just want to point out at this point that I did forget that this Torkoal had a very interesting move set. This Torkoal set was Overheat, Yawn, Body Press, Protect, which is very unorthodox. I mean, Yawn and Body Press aren't unheard of moves on Torkoal, but usually most Torkoal don't forego Fire-type moves like Eruption and Heat Wave. So I kind of slipped my mind at this point because I was really scared of Torkoal, when in reality I kind of shouldn't. I do make a very stupid misplay here by taunting into the Torkoal. I was like, duh, like you can't taunt in Psychic Terrain, so I don't know what I was thinking there, but I think I wanted to taunt him just so I don't get it, so he couldn't like Yawn, but of course couldn't do that because Psychic Terrain. But I do Flare Blitz into the Incineroar for some reason. I'm not really sure why I decided to attack where I did, but I end up catching the Venusaur on a switch-in, so that's really, really good for me. And I'm pretty much in a position where I can safely bring back Indeedee. Because now, yeah, Incineroar comes back in, but it's on a pixel of health. They can't fake me out because of Psychic Terrain, and I'm basically in a position here where I can just click Expanding Force, and while it won't be able to knock out the Incineroar, Expanding Force in Psychic Terrain will basically be able to knock out this Torkoal, and I can easily just Moonblast the Incineroar because it can't really do anything like Protect. So, despite, you know, I played pretty sloppily this first game, but I definitely think it was... I definitely think I played it well enough to the point where my misplays couldn't really catch up to me, and I just put myself in a position to win. So this single target Expanding Force, after me knocking out the Incineroar, gets the critical hit. Nothing short of overkill on that one, and I'm able to take this game 1. So going into game 2, we're going to be seeing a little bit of adjustment from both of our sides here, as he's going to be leading the Incineroar and the Magnezone, as I'm going to be leading basically what is my token lead, the Whimsicott and the Lapras. This lead is amazing because I have a lot of options in terms of Tailwind and Fake Tears and all this other stuff. But this is a bit problematic because as you saw last game, Incineroar is able to easily tank a or Max Geyser from my Lapras, so that KOing this turn 1 is not necessarily an option. And of course, both of these Pokemon are going to be resisting my G-Max Resonance, so it makes that option a little more risky to go for in this situation. But I decide that getting Resonance up is going to be my best play, and I want to switch out Whimsicott because it's easily going to be taking a Fake Out here. But also, it just gets doubled up. Whimsicott is just an instantly knocked out on turn 1. So I'm basically not really in the best position here. I decided to bring in Arcanine because not only does it threaten super effective damage on this Magnezone, but also it gets the Intimidate off on Incineroar, which is always nice to be lowering this thing's attack stat because it is more offensively oriented as the Assault Vest variant. So I'm going to go ahead and Gigantamax my Lapras here. Just optimizes my chances of surviving any hits that come into Lapras this turn because I know a fat Max Lightning is coming out from this Magnezone. But, I mean, another reason I didn't want to go for Max Geyser into Incineroar is that, like, not only do I not knock it out, but also I set up the Rain, which kind of makes it awkward for Arcanine when it comes back in, because it's going to be weakening Flare Blitz, and when dealing with Magnezone, I want Flare Blitz to be at pretty much max strength. But getting this extra chip off on Magnezone is important for a reason that you will see in a little bit. But yeah, that little chip from G-Max Resonance, you know, I figured having my Aurora Veil up over anything was going to be important, and even through the Aurora Veil and that special defense boost, Max Lightning is still going to be doing a ton of damage. And now with the Electric Terrain setup, that basically guarantees that Max Lightning is going to be able to knock me out next turn. But an important piece of information there that was revealed was that I'm faster than his Magnezone with my Lapras, so that pretty much allows me to get a free hit off. But this does create that awkward scenario where I can't Max Geyser the Incineroar because... if he does decide to play defensive with Magnezone and I, for example, go for Max Geyser into Incineroar and weaken my Flare Blitz and I just don't get the Flare Blitz off into Magnezone, then I'm basically in a position where I can't KO Magnezone, and that's not a good thing because Magnezone is carrying weakness policy, so if I just fire off a if I fire off a super effective attack that doesn't KO, then Magnezone just gets that free strength boost for free. But Max Geyser, I decided to double target the Magnezone actually, so that sort of allows me to go for that play, but also not get super punished for it if he decides to go for the Max Guard play. But now we're in a bit of a pickle, considering now that Dusclops has come in here, and I don't really have a solid way of stopping Trick Room from going up, because this also creates a situation where you can just bring back in his Incineroar and get an Intimidate off of my Arcanine, which makes it so Flare Blitz is not going to be able to KO the Magnezone. But I think my number one objective here is to get a KO on that Magnezone. And as you can see, Flare Blitz does a ton of damage because my Arcanine is carrying that Choice Band. Not, of course, enough to get the knockout here, but with the double target into the Magnezone off that G-Max Resonance, able to get the KO into Magnezone here. But since I double targeted that Magnezone, Dusclops pretty much remains able to get a free Trick Room up here, and even though he's basically lost his prime Trick Room sweeper at this point, my team is not very well suited to take on anything under Trick Room at this point, especially since Lapras has taken so much damage already. Now, I noted this in the last game, but at this point I did not realize that his Torkoal was not carrying something like the, what's it called, Eruption and Heat Wave. So I was insanely afraid at this point of Torkoal coming in, but he decides to bring in Incineroar for some reason. And yeah, I'm not really sure why. I mean, I guess you can get the Intimidate off on Arcanine, but I think regardless of which Pokemon he brought in here, I was in a terrible spot because a lot of my Pokemon, basically all the Pokemon I have left are either super fast or just not able to tank any hits anymore. So I was really just kind of playing scared at this point. I don't really know what I was going to do here, because I was in a position where he can just basically start picking up knockouts left and right, because Incineroar on its own could just start, you know, you can fire off an attack into Lapras, get rid of it, which is probably the biggest threat at this point. Arcanine obviously not being a super big threat now that it's been locked into Flare Blitz and not able to get any super effective damage off, even with the Sun Boost, and of course the Trick Room not doing Arcanine any favors here. So I just kind of start switching around here, trying to, you know, stall out Trick Room and stuff, but Lapras can only protect for so many turns, and Trick Room is obviously going to be a huge deal here. So, and Whimsicott coming in here. I mean, Whimsicott isn't the most helpful Pokemon exactly to have left, but I know my options in dealing with Incineroar are sort of fading at this point, because Lapras is now having to deal with the Sun, which is going to be weakening Hydro Pump, and Arcanine, you know, not being able to switch in. Like, Intimidate is nice to sort of slow down Incineroar, but at this point, Arcanine has taken so much damage to the point where it's not going to be able to be useful as an Intimidate pivot. So I decided to preserve Whimsicott here and switch out into Indeedee. Figured that I had the Focus Sash, so I can live a hit if either of these Pokemon want to target. But then I am quickly reminded that this Torkoal is a very unorthodox set and is carrying that Body Press, so he just has that immediate 100% KO option with Body Press going into Lapras. Goes for the Flare Blitz into what was the Whimsicott is the Indeedee. Indeedee, even with the Aurora Veil up, just knocks it down immediately to its Focus Sash here. And I mean, like I said before, like, even though I was reminded that this Torkoal was not carrying a standard set, I think regardless, I was in a very terrible position. So I mean, I'm kind of just playing at this point, trying to figure out some kind of game plan for Game 2. I realized that stopping Trick Room was probably going to be the best way for me to try to win this last game here, because I really have no outs in this game, as Torkoal basically has a 100% KO into Indeedee, and since my Whimsicott can't protect itself with the Focus Sash and also doesn't have the move Protect, it's going to get knocked out by Flare Blitz. So Incineroar is taking a lot of recoil here, but at this point I have a very damaged Arcanine and an Indeedee that is unable to protect here, so not going to be able to protect myself from the last turn of Trick Room, unless I get kind of lucky. But even then, like, Incineroar can easily just pick up the KO on Arcanine with the Darkest Lariat, so kind of just playing to the end of this game here. Not really a whole lot I can do. Try to go for the double protect here, not going to get it, but Body Press goes into the Arcanine, just able to pick up the KO from there. I'm actually impressed with how much damage Body Press from Torkoal is able to do. Like, Torkoal's defense stat is actually pretty impressive, so Body Press can do, like, consistent amounts of damage, so definitely not a bad move option. But yeah, with that Body Press, able to get the knockout on Arcanine, and Indeedee falls to Darkest Lariat. So yeah, it dropped game 2 there, but yeah, I basically just spent the last little bit of game 2 just trying to figure out a game plan for game 3, but I guess we'll just hop into that. So kicking things off for game 3, He's going to lead the Dusclops and Togekiss this time, as I decided to keep it the same with Whimsicott and Lapras. I don't know why I decided to keep Whimsicott, because Whimsicott did not end up being a very valuable asset in this game. Well, Whimsicott actually does something kind of important in this game, which you guys will see in a little bit, but in terms of the lead position, this is a really awkward lead for me, because this basically guarantees that he's able to get Trick Room up. I think a better play from my end would have been to go for something like Blizzard with Lapras, because I don't think getting the Gigantamax off this turn was the most important thing. Because, you know, Magnezone's coming in next turn, and he's basically going to be able to get a free turn, a free extra turn of Dynamax, since I'm wasting mine on this turn 1. And plus, like, I know he's going for Follow Me anyway, so he's just going to be able to redirect the G-Max Resonance away from Dusclops, so I'm basically not getting any damage off on this turn. I just realized there wasn't really much I could do with Whimsicott in this turn, since I decided to go for G-Max Resonance, so I just go for Taunt here, just in case if he decided he just didn't want to go for Follow Me for some reason, I can just taunt the Dusclops and just get the free KO onto Togekiss here. But, you know, it makes the pretty straightforward play. Just Follow Me's with Togekiss, redirects the Resonance away from Dusclops. And this is pretty bad, right? Because this is now the time where he's able to get Trick Room up for free. Basically, worst case scenario for me. And he's able to bring in his Magnezone. And one move that I forgot to touch on earlier that hasn't been revealed yet in the set, but something I had full knowledge of, was that he is carrying Bulldoze on this Dusclops, so he's able to Bulldoze his own Magnezone and activate his own weakness policy, so that basically guarantees that Magnezone is able to fire off a free attack into basically anything here and just get the KO. So I'm sort of in a very tricky position here, because as we saw in the last game, we saw how much Max Lightning did, even in the Aurora Veil without the weakness policy boost. So, and we also know that Magnezone is slower than my Lapras outside of Trick Room, so that makes it faster inside of Trick Room, and that basically means that Magnezone is basically guaranteed to attack here first. But I do go for Fake Tears into Whimsicott, or Fake Tears into Magnezone, just to try to get some extra damage off from Lapras if he decides not to target it this turn. And I feel like it was kind of pointless to play defensively with Lapras this turn, because if I ended up playing defensively, then like a situation like this happens where Whimsicott just gets KO'd for free, and then he just gets easy pickings for Lapras next turn. So I decided not to protect this turn. I think in this situation, regardless, you should have always attacked Lapras, because, like, what is Whimsicott doing in this situation? Yeah, I mean, like, Whimsicott's not really doing a whole lot in this situation, so I think Lapras should have been the target either way. Now, this is a situation where I kind of wish I had, E-Speed on my Arcanine, because I easily could have just picked off Magnezone at this point. At least I think an Extreme Speed from Arcanine Choice Banded probably would have been enough to pick up Magnezone at this range. But now I'm in a position where I can bring in my Indeedee here, and now since I didn't go for Max Guard last turn, I can easily just click Max Guard this turn and try to reverse Trick Room. The only way that this gets punished is that he reads me to go for Max Guard this turn, which is something that I was really afraid of. And honestly, like, if this were any other Dusclops set, I would have been really comfortable with it with Indeedee, because usually Indeedee, you know, Dusclops can't really hit Indeedee with anything besides Pain Split, but since in this situation he does have Bulldoze. But the thing is, the risk here he has for going for Bulldoze is that if he decides to go for Bulldoze, then he actually KOs his own Magnezone. So yeah, this makes this play for me even more free, because he basically cannot KO my Indeedee this turn, and I can pretty much just reverse Trick Room for free. But he, I think, recognizes this and tries to just pivot out his Dusclops, and makes the smart play of targeting down my Indeedee, as he correctly predicts me to go for the defensive play with my Lapras. So he is able to remove Psychic Terrain, which is another big thing here. It kind of limits Indeedee's effectiveness, because it neuters the power of Expanding Force and also makes it so it's not a spread move. But I still think I'm in a pretty solid position here, even though Trick Room has gone down at this point. But I still think Indeedee is a valuable Pokemon to keep around, so I'm deciding whether or not if I want to switch it out, just to, you know, potentially preserve it and predict his Magnezone to play a little bit more defensively. But I decide that I have the Rain up, and, you know, Incineroar is a pretty big threat to this team, as you guys have been seeing already, and I think that Magnezone is going to try to play some kind of defensive game here, so I decided to keep Indeedee in, going for the Expanding Force. I wasn't confident at all that Indeedee was going to be able to knock out this Magnezone from this range, but Expanding Force goes into just the Magnezone as he goes for the Max Guard, as I correctly predicted. Now Incineroar goes for Close Combat here. Now this is big, because I think Incineroar would not have been able to take Hydro Pump if he did not go for close combat, but the fact that he went for close combat basically made it so Incineroar was in KO range, or basically was in KO range from Hydro Pump, if I had connected it, that is. Very, very, very crucial miss on Hydro Pump there. I think that was pretty much game deciding at this point. Because Incineroar is faster than my Lapras, unfortunately, so that does mean, like, if I was faster than his Incineroar with Lapras, then I think I still would have been in a winning position here, but unfortunately, Incineroar is able just to go for another close combat into my Lapras, and that's pretty much game at this point, because I really need Lapras in order to deal with the rest of his team, and especially now since Magnezone wasn't Dynamaxed, Expanding Force would have been an easy knockout into it, even though it was single target without the Psychic Terrain. So, yep, Incineroar, since it's able to live through this turn, easily able to get the knockout onto Lapras with that close combat. And I'm basically left with just Arcanine versus Incineroar, a damaged Magnezone, and Dusclops. And the problem here is that I cannot really KO Incineroar without going for close combat, and if I lock myself into close combat, I basically can't KO Dusclops. Indeedee, as you can see, can't really do much now since it doesn't have the terrain advantage, and of course it can always just be KO'd by Bulldoze later on, so it doesn't beat Dusclops at all, even if I imprison it, so I can't go for Trick Room or anything. So I mean, this game is basically over at this point. Like, he's just kind of pivoting around his pieces, and he can just kind of just attack at this point. I decided to go for a last-ditch Imprison just so he can't get any further advantage with Trick Room up. Kind of pointless at this point. Like, Indeedee's just kind of clicking buttons. Like, Indeedee is kind of, like I said, kind of useless at this point without the terrain advantage and ability to Bulldoze, or an ability to take an attack at this point, or just get any kind of damage off with Expanding Force. Bulldoze, gonna knock out Indeedee, gonna do some nice chip damage to Arcanine, get a little bit of a speed drop here, and, you know, Arcanine, yeah, being locked into close combat, not going to be able to deal with Dusclops here. So Dusclops basically able to win this game by itself. Yeah, I just decided to give up this game. I was really upset after I missed that Hydro Pump. That was really huge, because I think if I hit that Hydro Pump, I just won the game on the spot, because it was basically a 3v1 basically versus Dusclops, because Magnezone was basically not going to be able to get another hit off that game. And with that, guys, that was my first round from the Players Cup. Now, even though Lapras wasn't able to come through for us, that inaccurate piece of shit. So even though Lapras couldn't come through for us in the end, I think there's a lot of things I could have done differently that set, mainly in just how I adjusted later on in games. I do think the Whimsicott Lapras lead just wasn't really going to work out for me a third time, especially in the face of Dusclops and Togekiss, and I definitely think there were a couple plays throughout the set that I could have just done a little bit more optimally, just to improve my chances of not having to rely on Lapras's horrible accuracy to win us the game. But with that, guys, if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like on it and subscribe to keep up with my future uploads whenever they do come. Part 2 will be coming soon, but in the meantime, I encourage you to do the stuff that I just said, and also make sure to check out my Twitch channel, where I will also be active on more often. Hopefully. But anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for part 2, and I will catch you guys next time.